Baker is a charity that's been working alongside rural communities across the county for over 100 years. At heart, our role is simple. We help rural communities help themselves, and we stand alongside them when things feel complicated or stretched. A lot of what we do is about rural leadership. In practice, that means being a trusted partner. We bring people together and share good ideas between villages, help communities find funding, and make sure rural voices are heard when decisions are being made. We aim to be the organisation local groups can turn to when they have an idea or a challenge and want someone to help them work it through. We support community buildings like village halls and community centres, which are often the heart of rural life. We work with the volunteers who run them, helping with governance, funding and long-term sustainability, so those spaces can continue to host everything from social groups to advice sessions. We also work on rural housing, which is why we're here today, helping communities understand their local housing need and, where appropriate, explore small-scale, affordable homes for local people. It's about shaping developments with communities, not doing things to them. Another key area is wellbeing and inclusion. Through our community hubs and village agents, we support people who might be isolated, digitally excluded, or struggling with the cost of living. It's practical, person-centred support that often stops small issues becoming bigger crises. We're increasingly involved in the environment too, supporting communities with projects around water, flooding, biodiversity, green spaces, helping rural areas become more resilient and climate aware. And we care about the rural economy. Thriving villages need jobs, skills, and sustainable local businesses. So we support communities to think about how they stay vibrant and viable in the long term. So really, we work at the point where people, place, and possibility meet. We're here to help rural communities stay strong, connected, and able to shape their own futures. Next slide, please. So why do we run Staying Connected, and why does it matter? Firstly, it's about expert insight. Rural communities often face complex issues, and it's not always easy to know where to turn. These sessions share practical examples, research, and real-life case studies, so you can learn from what's already working elsewhere. Secondly, it's about practical guidance. We bring in specialists, sometimes from our own team, like tonight, and sometimes from partners we work alongside to give you useful, down-to-earth advice you can actually apply in your own community. It's also a space for discussion. We make time for you to share experiences, ask questions, and learn from each other. That peer support is often just as valuable as the formal input. And finally, it's about connection. Rural roles can feel quite isolated, so these events help people build relationships, swap ideas, and feel part of a wider rural network. And that's what Staying Connected is all about, learning together and supporting each other to keep rural communities strong. Next slide, please. So I'm delighted to introduce our speakers for this evening, who are both members of my team. Gary Roffey and Russell Moore are both rural housing enablers at Cambridge Eureka and jointly lead our work developing rural affordable housing in parishes across Cambridgeshire. This evening, they'll be drawing on their experience of working with parishes across Cambridgeshire to explain how the rural affordable housing development process works in practice. Just as a reminder, there'll be time for questions at the end, so please do add those in the chat as we go along. So without further ado, I am handing over to Gary.
Thank you, Hayley. Yeah, I'm going to do the first part of the presentation, and then Russell's going to continue with the second part. Yeah, first of all, Hayley's introduced you to Cambridge Eureka. I'm sure many of you are already aware of us as an organisation. We have been working across Cambridgeshire for over 100 years now, so I've been around for a long time. The Rural Housing Enabling Service that we run aims to support parishes who want to increase the provision of affordable housing for local people. The term local there is really quite important, and I'll go on to explain a bit further as I go through the presentation why that's a particularly important issue in relation to the work that we do. Our work in terms of promotion is funded partly by DEFRA, the Department Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, and we also receive some funding from our partners as well. But it's free to parish councils, so our advice and support is free to parish councils. And we work with local communities primarily through parish councils, and we provide independent advice and we act as an honest broker with other parties. We don't build the properties ourselves. We're a facilitator. We help bring parties together to deliver schemes. The other thing to say, all the photos in this presentation are schemes that we've been involved in, and hopefully you'll realise that some of them are, very well. I think all of them are very attractive schemes. So we deliver our schemes through an affordable housing partnership. That's been around for a while as well. We've delivered about 400 homes through our partners over the last 8 years. We work with the local authorities, the 4 district councils: East Cambridgeshire, Fenland, Huntingdonshire and South Cambridgeshire District Council. And in terms of the people who build the houses and manage them, we have delivery partners, which include a number of housing associations, which is Accent, Bedfordshire Pilgrims Housing Association, Cambridgeshire Housing Society, English Rural, Hasto, Amplius, and South Cambridgeshire District Council also have a new build delivery team, so they also build rural exception sites themselves. The key thing is we all have a shared goal, and that's to deliver affordable homes for rural communities. So I thought I'd just start with just talking a little bit about what affordable housing is, because the term is an umbrella term which is used to cover different types of housing. The 3 types that we're involved in delivering are a type called affordable rent, which is rented accommodation, which is the rent itself is charged at 80% or less of the market rent. And up until recently, that has been the predominant rented form that we've provided through our partners. However, social rent, which has been around for a long time, but the current government is very keen on promoting, it is becoming more popular, and housing associations are being asked to deliver more social rent properties, and they are typically around 50 to 60% of the market rent, and the rents are based on a government formula, so they do come in lower and are more affordable. We also do something which is called shared ownership, which is part rent and part mortgage. That's where somebody buys part of the property and will pay rent on the other part. So they will own part of it. They can staircase up to a certain amount to buy more of the property if they want to as time goes on. One of the main advantages that has a much lower level of deposit than it would be if somebody was buying a property outright. The reason why these properties can be provided at a more affordable level is because they will often receive grants from Homes England or from local authorities to subsidise the development. The other key factor is also about land prices as well, and there is an issue in terms of how we work on rural exception sites, which I'll go into in a minute, which can also help deliver affordable properties because the land pricing is slightly different. Okay, so in terms of the need for affordable housing, one of the main issues in villages around Cambridgeshire and in other parts of the country is the high cost of buying houses and renting privately within villages, and the level of deposits that are often required for people to purchase a property. And that can be prohibitive. We know that in many of the villages, the cost is much higher than a lot of people can afford, and higher often than in the urban areas. There's also historically been lower levels of affordable housing built in rural areas. The vast majority of affordable housing has been built in urban areas, and where it has been built, and this is true across the country, there's been as people have been living longer, there's been less turnover, and a lot of the properties which are most valued have been bought through right to buy or right to acquire schemes. So there's been a lot less available to people to move into in rural areas. The other point is it can often be quite difficult for local people to access existing affordable housing in a village. And that's because of the way the allocation systems work across Cambridgeshire, which prioritise need across the whole district as opposed to identifying need within a local community. And that means that most affordable homes are accessible to everybody across the district, and are equally prioritised on the basis of need. And therefore, it means that often people within a village won't get access to a property, whereas somebody outside will be, because the need is assessed across the whole district. And the impact of not being able to access affordable housing in villages is quite significant. It often means that people who want to live in a village or a parish are forced to move out. That particularly can affect younger households who maybe moving out of the family home, or got younger children, or trying to set up home. Because their incomes may not be as high, and they don't already have a housing asset to put to use as a deposit. So that can have a significant impact, and it can affect family support networks. So there may be a parent who wants to give support to their children who've got grandchildren, or vice versa, children who want to give support to elderly parents. Those sort of networks can be broken down because families have to certain parts of families have to move away when they don't want to, or can't move back when they would like to. And also community networks can be affected as well. So sometimes particularly important people in the community, they may run clubs or organise events, or run be involved in the village hall, end up having to move out because they can't afford to stay within a village. The other impact is that sometimes people are forced to live in housing which is unsuitable for their needs. So they're staying in properties which are too small for them, for example, or perhaps even in properties which are too large and they want to downsize. Again, which can affect their situation, and can often be sometimes be a stumbling block to other people coming in the community, because, for example, if it's older people who want to downsize, those properties aren't freed up. The other impact which we often hear about is the impact on the use of local facilities. Now, for example, if a village does have a primary school, or some other form of schooling, then if younger families aren't in the village, then the use of that school or that facility can start to diminish, which can become a threat to the existence of that school if the numbers on the school roll start to decline. And it's similar for other facilities such as shops. And even for local businesses, if they're looking for employees, all those type of issues can come up if the people can't afford to remain within the village. So in terms of how we seek to address those issues, we use something which is called rural exception site planning regulations. This is something which is in the National Planning Policy Guidance, which is delivered by the government, but it's also reflected in all the local plans in the district councils as well. And what these regulations allow for is small developments of land for affordable housing adjacent to village boundaries, which are specifically to meet housing needs. Now, when I say small, it does vary. Most of the schemes that we tend to be involved in are between 8 and 15 homes. However, we've got property. We know there's schemes on site that we've been involved in, which is I think there's one on site which is 29 units at the moment, and it occasionally goes beyond that. But there's also smaller schemes as well. We've had schemes of 6 units, so it does vary a little bit. Most are around 8 to 15 homes. The key issue there is that the level of properties that are built has to link to the level of housing need within the local community, and certainly wouldn't exceed the housing need within the local community. Sometimes the schemes are smaller because it's deemed that that's appropriate for the size of the village. So we carry out a housing needs survey, which actually involves writing to all the people within the village. We also encourage people who may want to move back to the village to complete that survey as well. It's available to complete online and in hard copy. And we then analyse that data. We look at it alongside the housing register data for other people who have got strong connections to the village, and we will assess housing need from that basis. The important thing about schemes which are developed as a rural exception site is that through the planning process, you're able to prioritise those properties for households with a strong local connection to the parish. And that's very different to the way that other affordable housing is allocated normally across a district. It means that there's a local connection agreement in place, which would normally link to prioritising people who have been resident for a certain amount of time within a village, have maybe got relatives living in the village, or maybe have got maybe are working in the village. So there's a number of different issues there which can be included in a local connection criteria. And so those properties are prioritised for local people, and that also applies to relets and resales as well. They should be again, the same process should take place in that they're allocated to local people. The way the local connection agreement is set in place is that people within the parish are given first priority. There is then normally a cascade process put in place, so that if there wasn't somebody who was available, or wasn't somebody who was suitable within the parish at that particular time, and a property became vacant, it could go to neighbouring parishes if there wasn't somebody who was looking for a property at that particular point in time. So there is a sort of cascade to neighbouring parishes if that is required. The other issue to mention is that right to acquire, which is a right for housing associations to buy their properties, isn't allowed for most rural exception properties if they're developed in a designated protected area, which most of them are. The right to buy, if a council builds properties, the right to buy is still applicable. However, the government has recently introduced proposals to make that a much less attractive option. There's a longer lead-in period now being proposed for 10 years, and also the level of discounts for right to buy council properties is less. But the majority of homes we're involved in are built with housing, are built by housing associations. Although, like I said earlier, South Cambridgeshire District Council do also build some of the properties on rural exception sites. Shared ownership is capped at 80%, and again, that's to make sure that the properties stay within the local connection allocations process. So obviously, if they were bought outright, then somebody could then sell it on to whoever they wanted to. So again, that makes sure that it goes back through the allocations process, and local people are given priority to those properties. To make the site viable, sometimes a small number of market homes may be allowed. That would allow cross subsidy to make the scheme work financially. That doesn't always happen, but it does happen sometimes. But primarily, the majority of accommodation will still be affordable accommodation. The size, the scale, and the design are all must be appropriate to the village, and so there's a lot of consultation takes place with the parish and with the local community about those issues, because the idea is that the scheme will fit very much with the identity of the village as it is, and the delivery agents, the housing associations and the council we work with are experienced in doing that. So this slide just really identifies the different stages in the process. I won't go into every detail, but it just gives the main elements of the process. The first three here, the initial engagement, the establishing need, and the finding of a site, don't always go in a straight line as they're shown here, but this is the way that most commonly it would happen. So we would have an initial engagement with the parish council. That may come of events like today's. Parish council may be interested in exploring the issue more. We put out other promotions as well. So if we were approached by a parish council, we would go and speak to them and talk about our involvement and our role, and how we could work to explore the issue further if they wanted to. If a parish council is keen to progress and want to explore whether there is housing need within their local area, then we would seek to find a housing association to sponsor the housing needs survey. And we, Cambridge Acre, will conduct a housing needs survey as we are independent, and it gives that survey more validity as us being as an independent organisation. If that survey then identifies there is a need for affordable housing within the local area, then we would work with the housing association and with the parish council to see if a suitable site can be identified. That can sometimes take a while. It can be quite a difficult process, but as I mentioned before, we've developed 400 homes over the last 8 years with our partners, so it does happen. And if a suitable site is found, then the housing association would be responsible for discussing sale with the landowner. There'll then be a process of consultation with the parish about design, and the housing association would seek planning permission and potentially build properties, and then they'll be allocated in line with the local connection agreement, and the properties will then be managed by the housing association. So as I mentioned, some of these stages don't always go in the same order. For example, sometimes we're approached by a housing association who have already identified a site through a land agent has come to them, and they've identified a site in a village, and we will then approach the parish council and say, are you interested in pursuing it and exploring it with the housing association to see if there would be a potential to develop a rural exception site on the site. And sometimes we will do some site finding work ourselves before going to a housing association to find a sponsor for a housing needs survey. Sometimes the housing associations are only able to take on certain amounts of work at certain times, so we will sometimes do some upfront work and to make it more attractive for them to become involved in the process. I think that is the end of my slides. Yes. Okay, then I'm going to hand over to Russell, who's going to, I think, start by going through some common myths about affordable rural housing.
Yeah, hi everyone. As Hayley said, my name's Russell. I just work alongside Gary as a rural housing enabler. I'm just going to go through some sort of common myths. Gary will have mentioned sort of some of these already, so I won't go into too much detail for all of them. But one of the first common myths is that we don't need affordable housing here. But actually, many rural communities face what's called hidden housing need, where you can get young people, key workers, and older residents often struggling to stay in their homes or villages due to high prices. I mean, common example of those sort of being hidden are things that you get adult children still living at home when they want their own place. You can get people, as it mentioned, displaced to other villages or further away. Elderly living in homes that are too big for them who want to downsize. So the need might not immediately be obvious that that it's there, and often these people aren't on the housing register either because they may think that haven't got much chance of getting housing, so they might not be showing up there either. So parishes sometimes think there isn't the need, but once a housing needs survey is done, it can show that there is need. Another myth is that they'll go to people outside of the village. This is something obviously Gary's already spoken about. He's mentioned that homes though are always offered to people with a strong local connection, and that's written into a legal agreement. Whereas on the normal sort of district-wide housing register, it can go to the person whose highest priority. So it's banned on the housing register, is banded from A to D, with A the highest priority and D the lowest. So in that case, the house may go to somebody with an A, but for a rural exception site, it could go to somebody with a sort of a C or a D who's scoring lower on the sort of actual need, but because they've got the local connection, that they'd be the person who would be offered the housing. And Gary's already mentioned about the cascade system, about if it goes to different parishes, if there's nobody in that parish. Another myth is that it won't fit in with the village. Well, I mean, as you can see from some of the examples of what Gary's already shown of some of the houses, that they are designed with full consultation with the community, and they're of a high quality, reflecting the character of the village. And everything has to go through planning, and they wouldn't let something through that didn't sort of fit the character of the village. And it's worth mentioning also at this point that the homes are sort of eco-friendly, and they usually have heat pumps and PV panels. Okay, yeah, the next slide, please. Another myth is about the people thinking that it's going to increase traffic and strain on local services. Well, again, as Gary mentioned, developments are normally small scale and carefully assessed by planning before approval. Sites are often sort of 10 to 15 houses, and planning wouldn't let something through if it was going to have a sort of a detrimental impact. And also, often the people moving to the houses may already live in the village, so it may not actually be adding to sort of car use in the village or things like that. Another myth is that it could lead to uncontrolled expansion. So once you've got one site, you'll get lots more houses. But rural exception sites are strictly controlled and are only permitted where there's a proven local need through a housing needs study. You may occasionally get another phase connected to that first development, but again, that would just be only if there was unmet need from the first phase, and if again there would need to be possibly another housing needs study anyway, so it doesn't lead to a lot of new large development. Okay, next slide please. Another myth is that there's no land available for this kind of development. So I mean, finding land can be one of the most difficult things. But obviously, housing associations and the councils can be involved, and they're experienced in trying to find unused parcels of land that wouldn't otherwise be developed. And sometimes landowners unexpectedly, come forward to offer some of their land once they know that they're going to benefit the community. So, councils we may assist councils to put out a call for sites, and a landowner could come forward and give up perhaps some agricultural land. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, and another myth is that parish councils may feel like they're going to lose control of the process, but that the parish council and the local community always remain sort of central to everything that's happening at every stage. There's always ongoing consultation, ensuring voices are heard, and that's from initial planning right through to the design and delivery. So it's a collaborative process all the way through. It's not something that's imposed from the outside. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I'm just going to look at a few examples of some rural exception sites. So this is one that was completed quite recently in Fen Drayton. You can see the houses there. So the survey was done in 2017. It was developed and managed by the Housing Association, one of our partners, BPHA, and that produced 14 affordable homes for rent and shared ownership. So that was completed in January 2025. Okay, next slide, please. Another one was completed fairly recently, because this was March 2025, was Eltersley, and that was again the survey was done in 2017. This one's managed by Hastow Housing Association, and this produced 9 homes in total, so 7 for affordable rent and 2 for shared ownership. Next slide, please. And yeah, this one is in Newton. This is a older site, but it was completed in December 2023. So in this one, you can see there were 6 homes for affordable rent and 2 for shared ownership. And this one is developed and managed by Cambridge Housing Society. And we just got a short video now we'll show you of this site at Newton.
Hayley, do you want to take over the questions?
Yeah, sorry, my mic was off then. Yeah, thank you, Gary.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I just the music stopped and then that was it. Lovely. Okay, so we do have some questions from the chat, which I will ask. I will just reiterate that if anybody has any questions about a specific scheme, we probably won't be able to answer them today, but we will get back to you. Yes. So, and I will also say now that Russell has been talking about the myths, but actually Gary wrote a blog about them, which is being published today or tomorrow. So it's definitely worth going and having a quick look on the Cambridgeshire Acre website. We've got loads of information about rural housing at the moment, especially in the news, on our news pages, but then on the other pages as well. Okay, so my first question is Rosemary from Soham. How can we be sure that rural affordable housing doesn't become a ghetto because they are all lumped together instead of being peppered around?
I'm happy to start taking that one if you want me to. I think the first thing to say is that these are small schemes. They aren't large developments. So you aren't lumping together large affordable housing estates in one area. The other issue is that these are properties are being allocated to people within the existing community. So these will be going to people who are often already part of the community and have a commitment to that local area. And I think that's a really important one. We find that there's a very good community spirit. We went to see a scheme just last week actually, and spoke to one of the residents there who was saying what a good community feeling the scheme had about it. So I think because they are small schemes and they're within villages and they're existing communities, they don't really have that problem. Certainly that's my experience.
Lovely, thank you. The next question is from Alison from Teversham, and would not having a bus service hinder our parish?
Well, yes, no, Gary, you go ahead as well.
I think that again, because the properties are allocated to people within the existing community, the issue of a bus service may certainly be a big issue for a village, but it wouldn't necessarily be exacerbated by building these additional homes, because often they're being occupied by people who exist within the community already. Sometimes there are people moving back who were previously living there, so there could be an increased demand there. But again, it's fairly small scale, so it doesn't tend to have the impact on the existing facilities that obviously a larger development would. Obviously, when planners are looking at developments, they are looking at all the factors that influence the benefit of that development. Transport potentially could be one of them, but like I said, because they're rural exception sites and because they're looking to deliver affordable housing to meet local need, they often are viewed in a way slightly differently than other larger general housing developments would be.
Lovely, thank you. Rosemary from Soham has just commented, and it was obviously a comment on where you were saying, as you were talking, that not all developers behave in such an inclusive way. But I think I know the ones in our partnership are all, and they work closely with the district councils as well.
Yeah, I would say that's true. I think the partners that we're involved with, they are very geared up to deliver these smaller schemes within rural areas. They recognise the importance of the scheme being something which the local community feels some ownership of and that they want. There is, there is still sometimes opposition to schemes, like with any new housing schemes there can be, and often affordable housing. When you start talking about affordable housing, some people do get concerned, which is why we do sessions like today, and we do the myth busting sessions as well, to try and explain to them that this is slightly different than a large affordable housing development within a village. It's a small scale, and they're designated for local people. Like I said, the housing associations are very much geared up to deliver those type of units.
Yeah, just to add to that, yeah, so on a practical level, obviously the housing associations have to sort of manage these schemes, into the future. So, they wouldn't want to have, problems. So I mean, they wouldn't, want to create. Not sure about calling it a ghetto, but I'm not sure they wouldn't want to create something where you've got a lot of people that would causing possibly problems in one place. So they have to manage them and be careful about how the scheme's sort of balanced. And
Okay, I'm just going back because I've realised I've missed a question, and it was Paul from Ben Drayton. If rents are significantly less than the market rent, how do housing associations make a profit in the long run? Presumably the grant, etc., only assist them in the short term.
Do you want me to take that, Gary? Or?
Go on then, yeah, and I'll chip in.
Well, I
If
was
you
just to say, yeah, it is. I mean, the housing association, that their let's call them spreadsheets where they make money run over decades. So I mean, it may be that they're not sort of making, going into profit on these for many years ahead. So even though I mean, they obviously get the grants initially to help them out with the building, and but then yeah, say going forward, it could be a long time before they get into profit.
the other thing
Gary
is,
seems to add to that. Yeah.
yeah, the other thing is just on the general point of how they work. All the housing associations we work with are actually not for profit, so it would never be profit in terms of going to shareholders or anything like that. These are not for profit organisations. So any money, any surpluses, if there was a surplus, would be ploughed back into the organisation. What they're obviously very careful to do is to have a scheme and make a scheme viable. They will look at the grant levels that are coming in. They will look at the land prices as well. And one of the things which is significant about rural exception sites is with the land, it's not going to be valued at the same price as a standard market development would be. If it's private, if it was a private housing market site, the land price would be much higher. But the only reason these schemes can come forward is because they're going to be a rural exception site for rural housing. So it means the land price that's payable on these units is less, significantly less than it would be on a market development site. It's still higher than it would be for an agricultural land price. So there is still a benefit often, for example, if a farmer is willing to sell a piece of land to us, but certainly not the same levels as a market site. And that combination of having a lower land price, having some grant funding as well, and then also an element will be raised as a loan for the housing association as well, to pay back over a period of time through the rents that are paid. And their models will, as Russell said, run over a number of years to make sure that scheme over time balances out.
Lovely, thank you. Then I've got Hazel from Burwell who's asked, can you have this type of housing incorporated into future housing planning?
You can have a general commitment to affordable housing and to rural exception sites within the local authorities planning documents and within neighbourhood plans as well. In terms of the actual sites, you wouldn't have them within a local plan. Hence they are called exception sites, which means that they are an exception to the sites which are allocated within the local plan. It's why the sites are normally on the edge of the village settlement boundary, so they abut the village settlement boundary. The idea is they still need to be accessible to the facilities within the village, but they wouldn't be an allocated site. If they were an allocated site, it wouldn't be a rural exception site, which means you then couldn't get the local connection criteria as part of the planning regulations.
Okay, and then I've got a question from Paul from Friend Drayton. Once the properties are built, what happens if at any point the housing association wishes to sell the site or properties, or the housing association folds, or for whatever reason?
Yeah, sure.
Go on, Russell. Go on.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, it's all set sort of legally that the housing association can't sort of sell off any of the. I mean, I think you're talking about the whole site, but obviously the housing association can't sell off individual properties or anything like that. They have to stay within affordable and as part of the scheme, and even with as we mentioned in the presentation, with shared ownership properties as well, they can only purchase 80%, so they can't ever be sold off. So I haven't come across a situation where a housing association would wish to sell a whole scheme. I mean, if in theory that did happen, I mean, if there's some financial problem, I don't think that would arise. But because they obviously plan into the future about how these schemes are going to work, then you know, I suppose another housing association would take it over, but they can't just become private or be sold off or anything like that. I don't know, Gary, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, no, that's correct. The properties are protected and have to remain affordable housing in perpetuity. Normally, that would be with the existing housing association. You do occasionally get mergers of housing associations. The housing associations that we work in our group are well established, and some of them are quite focused specifically on smaller rural accommodation. It's not impossible that they can merge, but still, that organisation that was originally there would be within that larger organisation if that did happen, and the properties would still have to remain rural affordable housing in perpetuity.
I think that is the end of the questions. If anyone else got any more, please do pop them in the chat. I know Alison's been summing up some of the things that you've been saying as you've been going through. Yes, so any further questions from anyone? If not, we will move on. I can't see any more in there. I will just say that the presentation that Gary and Russell have done this evening, we can adapt it and bring it and deliver it to a full parish council meeting. We do it quite regularly. I know Gary's out next week doing this. So yes, please, we're more than happy to come and talk to anyone about the work that we're doing. So please do get in contact with us. Shall we move on to the next slide then, please, Gary? I just wanted to close by thanking everyone for coming along and participating, asking the questions. Particular thanks to Gary and Russell for sharing their knowledge and on-the-ground experience with us all. But I do just want to take this time, as I've got you all in the room, to remind you that Cambridge Eureka is a membership organisation and the reasons why you should consider joining us if you haven't already. Next slide, please. So membership gives practical support when you need it, whether that's telephone or email advice from our team, regular funding updates or discounts on more in-depth consultancy and training. You also become part of our online members network and receive our monthly Staying in Touch newsletter, so you can keep up with what's happening across rural Cambridgeshire and pick up ideas you might want to try in your own community. Members get invited to training, workshops and events just like this one, where you can learn, share and build those valuable rural connections. We're also keen to shine a light on the amazing work happening locally, so we promote member projects through spotlights and case studies wherever we can. And of course, as a member, you have a voice in the organisation, including a chance to vote at our AGM and help shape our future direction. But more than any single benefit, membership is about being part of a wider movement that's making a real, tangible difference. Together, we're helping create stronger, greener and better connected rural communities across Cambridgeshire. We'd love you to be part of that. Next slide, please. We're taking a break from staying connected in August, but we will be back with more sessions that will hopefully be of interest. I can tell you hot off the press, we've put it in the calendar today that on the next session will be on the 16th of September, and it's all around addressing fuel poverty with Henry from PECT. So that's going to be a really brilliant session. But if there is anything that you would like to see us address, any subjects that you find interesting, want to know more about, if there is a speaker that you've seen and you've thought they're brilliant, you think other people in Cambridgeshire should hear from them as well, please do let me know. Or pop it in the chat or reply when I send you the email tomorrow. That would be really good. And the last slide then, please, Gary. So that is it for tonight. Thank you all very much for coming. We will send an email out tomorrow with the slides, with the recording for anyone who couldn't come and make it. If you've got any questions, we've got the contact details on the slide here, but then they'll also be on the email tomorrow. So thank you all very much. Any last minute questions, you can ask them now, but if not, have a wonderful evening. I have to disappear to prepare an 8-year-old for a school disco. So yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.